Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, your go-to spot for all things iOS development. Today, we're diving into how to add infinite scrolling and pagination in SwiftUI, and I will walk you through one of the simplest way to implement it, even if your app is fully built in SwiftUI. So let me quickly explain to you how infinite scroll with pagination works. So infinite scroll with pagination works by loading a limited set of data, or a page, in this case, at a time. As the user scrolls near the bottom of the list, the app automatically fetches the next page and appends it to the existing content. So this creates a seamless, continuous scrolling experience without overwhelming the app with too much data at once. In a simple way, you can actually set a check for if you're scrolling to the last 3 items or 5 items on the screen or in the table view or in the list, and at that time you want to actually load more data. So whenever user continuously scrolling down, it will actually continuously to show all the data. But before we begin, don't forget to show your support by hitting the like button, leaving a comment, and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of my future content. So let's get started. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned of using SwiftUI for the infinite scroll and the pagination. But unfortunately, there is no official ways in SwiftUI or SwiftUI SDKs to actually implement the pagination and the infinite scroll. So in order to achieve that, there's a few different ways to work around this. However, we want to go with the simplest possible. So the easiest way is actually go back to use UI view controller. So let's start with creating the proper folder for it. So have a proper structure so it can easily understand what we're creating. So we will actually using model view model structure, but in the code, we're not gonna pay too much attention to actual structure and all the details, error handling. We're just gonna be creating the code on the go and trying to be as clean and as modular as possible. But of course, there's a different way you can make the code better, potentially some dependency injections. So let's start by creating our representable. Basically, we will use this public API, which returns a bunch of characters from Rick and Morty's, and I will put this in the link in the description. So let's just call this representable Rick Morty representable. And since it's bridging, we need bridging from UIKit code to the SwiftUI. So for the representable, we still need to use the SwiftUI module. So let's create a struct. It's called use the same name. Inside the view, we want to call Rick Morty representable, and we want to use UI view controller representable. And this, it's just typically we need to have the type alias, and of course we need a type, and we can just autocomplete with all the initial stuff we needed. So of course right now we need to create this Rick Morty view controller. So let's go ahead and create that. So since this is a UI kit code, we need to expose this to the UI kit. And since we're going to creating a table view, and the best way to do this is actually using the UI table view controller with UI table view data source prefetching. So let's create a UI controller, and we're going to call it UI table view controller. And also we want to implement the UI table view data source prefetching. And since in this table view we're gonna handle pagination and also the data itself, so we need to at least to have a variable actually to keep tracking for the pages. Of course, there's a different way you can implement, you can manipulate the pages, but for now we're just going to be automatically tracking them, and as you scroll, and we're going to updating them. So let's call it current page. And based on the API, actually the first call you make, it will actually returns a page 1 for the next page. So we're gonna be using the current page, set this as 1 for now. And next, we want to create a view model or an API or API service. Next, of course, we want to have the view did load. And remember, you need to call super. Next, we want to actually implementing the UI table view data source prefetching code and also the standard table view code. So let's actually call it to add those functions, callback functions into it. And we're just going to return a really simple number for now. And this one, we're going to return a simple blank table view cell for now. And also, one very important thing we need to call is the prefetch. The table view prefetch at row at. So that actually will help us to keep tracking and check if user has a scroll to the last either 3 or 5 rows on the screen. So then that's where we're gonna be calling a fetch function. We're gonna call it right here. I'm gonna call fetch characters. And we're going to make an API call here to retrieve the data, which will be also called right here. Okay, so now we have this controller. Let's go back to finish up the representable to make sure everything is properly resolved. And here, basically, you don't really have to do anything unless you want to make some additional updates to it, to the view controller or the table view controller. So for now, we're just going to put a comment here to say here is update the view controller, the table view controller, if need. Okay, so basically, if now we run this code, it does basically almost nothing, pretty much blank. So we need to actually call the representable somewhere from the SwiftUI side. So actually, whenever the app launches, it actually bridging over to the UI table view controller. So it will actually load up the table view. So let's add that code in the content here. We can pretty much remove those default ones. It doesn't matter. So we're going to call it rickandmorty representable. Okay, once we've done that, next thing we have to do is actually creating the table view itself. So we're not going to use any like storyboard and all that, because that actually adds a complexity for whenever you're trying to work with SwiftUI codes here. And also for this demo purpose, we're not going to do that. But of course, if you want to use a storyboard, it's totally fine. As long as you add the UI table view controller or the view controller properly to the UI controller representable, and then that should be properly able to expose to SwiftUI code. So we're just going to be programmatically creating an additional view a more like a character table cell so that we can actually properly populate this table view. So let's add right here. So let's just call it character table cell. And for this table cell, of course, it's still going to be exposing to UIKit since everything's still under the UIKit control. So we're going to call this character table view cell, and we're going to use the UI table view cell. And we're not going to use IB outlet since we're not using since we're not using the storyboard. We're just going to be creating a name label to actually show the name for each character. And then afterwards, we're going to create a thing called character image view. It's going to be using UI image view. And after that, of course, we want to init this properly from using the default init. So we can hit tab to autocomplete, but of course, we need to make some additional changes. So let's get rid of all those stuff inside. We can actually creating from scratch here. So we're going to call super.init. I'm going to pass in the style, reuse identifier, everything. Kind of like the view did load. We have to call the super. So once we do that, we need to actually configure the label. And then we need to configure the image view. And after that, we need to actually create a horizontal, I would say horizontal stack view to contain the image and the label. And after that, we need to actually constrain it, the stack view to the content view with padding, so that the auto resizing will actually know how to actually handles everything. So let's do this. And also, oh yeah, we also need to add another init with coder. So it just be there, and nothing you have to worry about, and the code will still function properly. You can ignore this. It's basically kind of like a default thing you have to have. So let's configure the label for now. So we're gonna call it, no, we do not want to complete name label. We'll probably want to actually turn off the translation, translates auto resizing mask into constraints. And then want to call it name label again. .font. We'll want to probably use the UI font here. System font, I believe. And want to use size, give it maybe 824. I believe that's the right size to use. 17, I think I feel like it might be a little bit too small. So next thing is a name label. .text color. We're going to be using the label color. So whenever we are switching from dark modes, and everything still will show properly there. So name label. Number of lines, we're just going to give a 0 for now. Next, we want to configure the image view. Should be almost similar. Want to actually turn this off. And also we have a content mode. We need to set aspect fit. And also character image view. We also have want to do a clip to bounds. And if you're curious about what does that mean, so basically a Boolean value that determines whether subviews are confined to the bounds of view. So I want to turn it on to true. And character views dot layer. I want to add a corner radius, and I think it's a. We can start with a. If we need to adjusting, we can do that afterwards. And next, I want to create a H stack. I want to use a UI stack view. And the arrangement is character image first and the name label after. Yeah, okay. That is what we need. Next, we want to actually call the H stack again. Want to set a axis. Basically, the axis along which the arranged views lays out. I'll probably want to use a horizontal. And want to give a little spacing in between. Let's give a 12 for now, I guess. Then H stack again. On the alignment, definitely align the center so they don't look too weird. And next, I want to actually call H stack again, and we also want to turn this off. Next, I want to do an NS layout constraint to activate some of the paddings and the constraints. So I want to have a leading H stack, leading anchor. I want to have a constraint. Let's set it to 16. And I believe we also need this bracket thing here. Okay, so H stack. We want a leading, trailing, top, bottom. Trailing. Let's give also 16 H stack. Top. Top. Let's give a half of the 16. I think it look better there. H stack. The bottom. Also 8. And also probably want to fix the image view size as well. So fix the image view size. So it does not like stretch, because we don't know if the image come back will be different size or something. So let's fix that. Let's set to 60 for now. And character image view, the high anchor constraint equal to 60 as well. Okay, I think we built a pretty good table view cell here. Of course, there's a few things we need to do, basically like passing in the data to set data to the name and the view, and the name and also the character image view, and also to download the image separately asynchronously for each cell. So in that way, we don't stack the view, so the table view itself can be loaded first. So let's go back to the view controller. So now, since we already have the table view cell, we can actually start by registering the table view cell. This will be character table view cell, and let's just call it almost the same name. Let's add an ID behind, so we can use that as like the ID to identify the cell. So next one, I want to actually table view. We need to actually assign this prefetch data source equal to self. So that way we can actually properly use the prefetch row add. And next, of course, we want to make a API call here, so we can actually call fetch characters. So whenever we load the table view, we want to load the characters, and then whenever the data available, we need to show on the table views. All right, next we need to create a view model so we can actually fetching the data from it. So let's create a new view model file. I'm gonna call rickandmorty view model. So in this case here, I think foundation should be okay. And since we're using view model and we're mostly in SwiftUI, and this view model definitely can be reused in a different SwiftUI code in here. So let's just go ahead and use observable. I'm gonna call it class rickandmorty view model, and we want to definitely returns the data that we created. So we're gonna call it RM. We're gonna call it RM and stand for rickandmorty and characters. It's going to be an array of, let's call it cartoon characters. Cartoon character. So now we actually need the data model. But let's leave that for now. Let's get some of the code set up first. So we need actually a URL to it. So let's get this private, and let's call it let character URL. Now we actually need a URL to actually call it. So let's call private let character URL string. And since we already actually copied over in our clipboard, so we're just gonna simply paste right here. And of course, we want to actually create the pages. We actually want to have the pagination controlled by ourselves. So we're gonna be removing those, just gonna keep to the character point. And then now we want to create a function called fetch data. And we want to pass in the page. And we want to give a default value of f1, or we can just input it since we're to have that value in the table view controller. So we want to make this async through call. We want to use the new async away. So we want to actually, if the page number changes, of course we want to change the URL, right? So and append a different value to it. So I want to actually create a thing called a final URL string. Final URL string. And that's going to be equal to the character URL. And then we want to check if the page number is greater than 1, then we want to actually finalize the URL string and equal to character string plus the page and the page number to it. So in that way, we can always update the page numbers. Next, we want to do a guard. I want to do a guard like check on the URL to see if there's any error. If there are any errors, I want to through this simply just using URL error, a bad URL. Of course, we're not going to handle the error in our case, so we're just going to simply put that there. Next, I want to do the do catch. Actually, start to making the URL session call. So let's do let data in response equal to try away and URL session. And we want to use this async data call. And we only need to pass in a URL. We do not need anything specials. Unless we need to do something different and something more sophisticated API call, then of course we need to using another version of this, which is we need to pass in a request. But for now, that should be okay. So I want to do a guard lat check on the response as well. I'm gonna call HTTP response equal to response as HTTP URL response. Otherwise, and also we want to do another check here, checking if the 200 code, I believe it's a 3 dots, 299. That should be okay. So if they're containing the status code, if those cases are true, then we continue to move on. If not, we want to actually through the error. So I'm gonna simply put a bad server response here. And after that, we want to actually do a let character result check. But before we continue to do that, decode data. Before we can do that, let's go actually create the models. And as you guys can see, basically the returning response is basically a big giant JSON. and it has this info and also results. And the results is actually containing the array of different characters and more informations. But in our case, we actually don't care too much of it. We only care about this image, and also this name right here. So we can actually create a simpler version of this data model because we only need to extract certain things. So let's create a data model here. We can just call it a character. And inside the character, we want to create a struct. We're going to call it character response. And we're going to use codable. And we will have a info, as we just mentioned, and as we just saw. That is a custom value as well. I believe is, you can call it character info codable. We can just simply have a next. Basically, it's showing the next URL. We can definitely use this information to verify if our URL is correct, but I'm just simply put here to show you guys. And next, we want to actually create another one is called cartoon character, like we named before. It's also going to be using codable. And we want to actually have a ID. I'm going to use double because we're not sure if that's an integer or a double, but a double is space safer. And next is let name, and it can be string. Another one is going to be image. And since we can, assuming that image URL return as guaranteed a URL, we can actually just use URL here. The JSON decoder is actually smarter enough to actually understand that is a URL, so we can directly use this type and it will automatically convert to a URL. And the reason we're using the optional for this one here is because if somehow we actually hitting the last page, so it probably not going to have a next value in this part. So it's better to use optional so it does not crash the applications. So, or you can handle it differently, trying to decode if anything percents. Otherwise, you can give a default value or a null. It's up to you. So next, we want to use actually result and then the cartoon characters. Now we can actually go back to the view model, trying to complete our decoding. So let's by extracting the value first, trying to decode the value first. So we're going to call it character result equal to try JSON decoder and decoding, decoding the character response self from the data. So as we mentioned, since we're doing the infinite page scrolling with a pagination, so whenever we're continuous scrolling, we want to actually have those data appended. So we do not actually replace them, but if you are actually the first time, so next we want to actually to append the data to the RM characters. So in that way, we can guarantee whenever we're scrolling the pages, scrolling the table view, and all the pages data has been appended properly. So for that, we can actually do RM character.append and contents. We want to get the result for it. We want to append that. So that should be automatically updating the RM characters that we needed, and it should update the UI level as well. So for this arrow, it's going to be simply through an error here. So now let's go back to the table view controller and trying to finish up. So in this fetch character, of course, we want to make the call. And since we're dealing with async, we need to add a task here. So we want to do catch. And we want to call it try away. Rickandmorty Oh yeah, we do need to add the view models up top here first. So we're gonna call it a private rickandmorty VM equal to rickandmorty view controller. And then we're gonna call rickandmorty VM dot fetch data, and we're gonna pass the current pages into it. Because whenever we get the first page, we want to bump the page numbers, so we can achieve continuously updating the API call for different pages. And after that, we of course need to reload the table view. Then in the catch, we're just going to do a print, just so we can debug if there's any errors shows up. And for the table view number of rows in section, we can simply use rickandmorty .arm_characters.count. And for the cell for row at index, so this one actually we're going to use the custom cell and start to passing information to the cell. So let's go ahead with table view and DQ characters index character table view cell. Yeah, that is correct. And here we need to config the cell data. And afterwards, of course, we want to return the cell. All right, next, let's go to the table view cell actually to configure the data. So let's go down here. Let's just add a function called configure. And what we want to do here is actually passing in the RM character. We want to pass in, oh yeah, it's called cartoon character, and we want to actually pass the name label. RM character name name label the text equal to RM character name. But for the image one, we want to actually create another function to actually download the image. Since we already have the image URL, so we want to download asynchronously. So we want to call it load image. Of course, we're just going to pass in the URL since we already have that. And then we want to actually use URL session. It's called shared data task data from a URL. So let, and we do also want to use to catch. And for this, we're just going to be printing out an error here. We're just going to say error downloading image. It's going to be let data. And we're not going to care about the response at the moment for this one. Try away. Of course, in a real production case, you probably do want to handle that properly. Let's see, async. Oh yeah, and let's do this right here. Task. Once we get the data, is actually simply just convert into that image, and then we can use a dispatch queue. Actually, you know what? We actually can just use a main actor here, and then we can just pass the character image view dot image equal to image. So when that happens, then after that we can just call it load image, then pass the RM character dot image URL directly into it. So now let's go back to the view controller again. Oh, we're missing a var there. Right here, we can just call cell.configure. Pass in the character, which is rickandmorty.rm characters index path row. And the next one is handles here. So in order actually to go to check when we actually need to download it, we actually need to add a check here. I believe this which we need to use index path and contains. I believe this should be fine, and we want to check at last third row or the fifth one, probably fifth one. So give us some more time before a user scroll down below. So then whenever we are at the last fifth row, we actually want to fetch it again. So fetch next page data, and then we want to just call fetch fetch characters. So that actually should help us to actually load the data properly. Now we can actually run this application, do a quick test to see how that looks. Oh, it seems like we're missing something here. Let's see what we're missing. Okay. I think we forgot to add actually the view, the H stack to the content view. So let's try it again. All right, you can see everything is loaded up. Now let's slowly scrolling down, and you will continue to see we can infinitely scrolling down with the fetching print be showed up right here. It should show fetch next page data. So let's do that. As you can see, the first fetch next page data has shown, and you can see we can continue to scroll, and it can scroll, it can fetch it again. And fetch it again. So if we go back up, it should not trigger that. All right, so and that's how you implement infinite scrolling and a pagination in SwiftUI using a simple approach. Thanks for joining me today, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more iOS dev content, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, happy coding.